a lot of people dread seeing an AMD sponsorship or bundle deal announced with an upcoming AAA game that they're interested in. And the reason is that often means they will not have DLSS support at launch or possibly ever. And that is a really big deal. I've been wanting to talk about this for a long time, but I wanted to gather some data. Haven't had the chance to do that, and now this morning I noticed this article at WCCF Tech where they did the legwork to not only gather the evidence, as well as quotes from AMD and Nvidia answering the question, do they block competitors' upscaling technology implemented in games that they partner with or bundle with? And AMD dodged the question. Nvidia did not dodge the question. We're going to look at the data because first let me be clear here. There are some AMD bundled games that do have DLSS support. So somehow this is not an all or like every game sort of a deal. But there is a clear pattern to this data. And this is bad because, guys, and I have a feeling I'm going to get ripped in the comments section about that being some kind of Nvidia shill, that sort of thing. If you want to look at the closest thing I do to shilling, which is trying to sell a product or something like that, look at my monthly GPU buyer guides, where I constantly recommend AMD GPUs for their value, especially at pretty much every price class up to $600. So I'm not an Nvidia shill here. I don't have a preference between companies. And this is another issue that I think a lot of people have when they're going to try to defend AMD here, is that they feel like one company is the good guy or the bad guy. Companies exist to make money, and they're going to do whatever they think is best for them to make money. And sometimes that's being the more consumer-oriented company. Sometimes it's not. I think AMD absolutely needs to get called out for this, and this needs to stop. FSR does not look as good as DLSS. It is nice that it's supported on all brands of GPUs, and that's going to be a lot of people's excuse for why this is okay for AMD to do. If you're only going to implement one upscaling technology, then it should be FSR because that supports all GPU brands. Okay, fine. I see your point, but the thing is, in a lot of modern game engines like Unreal Engine 4, Unreal Engine 5, for example, there are just plugins that make implementing all of these technologies not a vast amount of work. The vast majority of PC gamers have an Nvidia GPU, and so there is a I don't think there's a good argument for why it makes a game better to exclude DLSS from the game. Especially there's games that have been very CPU bound recently, and having something like DLSS 3 support can be extremely beneficial in those types of cases. But anyway, let's go ahead and look at the actual data for all of this. So this, first of all, I want to give credit. This is the original article. This will be linked in my video description from WCCF Tech. They gathered this data. Their table of data doesn't display well here on my screen all at once. I think this videocards.com article, which is talking about this WCCF Tech article, has a more concise looking table of data for us to look at to establish the pattern of behavior, because making wild accusations doesn't make any sense. What we're looking at here is games that had a bundle partner recently. So we're not just looking at games that either only have DLSS or only have FSR. What the data set is here is games that have a GPU bundle deal. For example, if you bought an Nvidia GPU recently before the launch of Redfall, you got Redfall free with that Nvidia GPU. Now, that's what we call a bundle deal, right? Recently, you also had the chance to buy an AMD GPU and get Star Wars Jedi Survivor bundled in with the deal. However, when we compare what sort of upscaling technologies were available in those games, here's what we're talking about. Redfall had FSR 1 and 2 on its release date, as well as DLSS 2 and 3. Whereas Star Wars Jedi Survivor launched with FSR 2 support and does not have DLSS support still to this day. And this is a big deal. Jedi Survivor, first of all, would look better on people with DLSS-capable GPUs if they could use DLSS when they are upscaling. It does look better than FSR2. This is a fact. And the other thing is, Jedi Survivor can be extremely CPU limited in a lot of areas in the game, so if the game had DLSS 3 support, it would really help smooth out those areas that are CPU limited. And this is an Unreal Engine 4 game, and Unreal Engine 4 has plugins to make adding in support for technologies like XeSS, DLSS, and FSR very streamlined. It's not a massive amount of development time when compared to the overall development and optimization of the game, and a great way to boost performance without massive image quality loss is to implement something like DLSS. There has even been a modder who has released a DLSS mod for Star Wars Jedi Survivor. There is no reasonable reason why the developers could not have done this in an Unreal Engine 4 game, and yet it is not there, and it's an AMD bundle partner. Now, let's be clear, though, that this is a pattern, but it's not 100% of cases. Dead Island 2 is another example of an AMD bundled game that still does not have DLSS, whereas The Last of Us Part 1 was an AMD bundled game and did launch with DLSS at launch. But that's more rare than it is common, right? It's an exception to the pattern that we're being established here. Resident Evil 4, no DLSS still to this point. Whereas Forspoken did have an AMD bundle partner and ship with both DLSS and FSR. Now, if we look at Nvidia bundles, Nvidia bundles, can we find a single example of an Nvidia bundle that didn't have FSR support? Meaning Nvidia seems to not be doing anything to block FSR support in their games that are bundle partners, right? Looking at all these examples, we can only find one example of an Nvidia bundled game that did not ship with FSR support. That's Battlefield 2042. But the thing is, Battlefield 2042 did ship before FSR 2 was available, if I'm checking my dates correctly. And so, sure, they probably could have had FSR 1 support, but this, again, is a while back and before FSR 2 was out, and FSR 2 is a more direct competitor with DLSS upscaling. It's a temporal upscaler rather than just a simple spatial upscaler, that kind of a thing. So we only see that one example on this NVIDIA bundle, whereas, again, it seems to be with AMD bundles, it is the rule to not have DLSS support, except for a few exceptions, specifically The Last of Us, Uncharted, which is from the same publisher, and then, and Forspoken. Those are the only exceptions. So clearly, some games do get both, even with an AMD bundle, but that is clearly less common. So now, the WCCF did ask AMD to respond to this situation, and what is their response? They say, to clarify, there are community sites that track the implementation of upscaling technologies, and these sites indicate that there are a number of games that support only DLSS currently. For example, they give a link. Now, let's stop right there for a second. So clearly, they are dodging and trying to obfuscate the actual question that was asked. Because the question isn't, are there games that only have DLSS support and not FSR support? The question is, are games that are bundled with, in other words, partnered in some way with one of these two GPU companies, specifically blocking the upscaling tech from the other company? That's the question that is being asked, but AMD seems to be intentionally misunderstanding or misrepresenting the question. Because it's a different question just to say, are there games that have DLSS and not FSR, than it is to say, are there games bundled with AMD that are specifically blocking DLSS support, right? Different question. And again, we saw that NVIDIA bundled games do not seem to have a pattern of blocking AMD's FSR support. So let's be clear, they are not really answering the question that's being asked here. They also say AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution is an open source technology that supports a variety of GPU architectures, including consoles and competitive solutions, and we believe an open approach that is broadly supported on multiple hardware platforms is the best approach that benefits developers and gamers. And yes, I agree that it's nice to have an upscaling technology that does work on multiple hardware vendors. I like that FSR is platform agnostic. It runs on Intel, Nvidia, and AMD GPUs. That's great. Nobody is arguing with that being a good thing. But that's, again, not the question that's being asked. Just because yours can run on other GPUs doesn't mean that DLSS doesn't look better when it's available, and that you should be blocking it from being implemented into a game, because that just hurts consumers who have a DLSS-capable GPU, which is more of the gaming market than AMD. Anyway, AMD is committed to doing what is best for game developers. I don't think so if that's what we just saw here. And gamers, and we give developers the flexibility to implement FSR into whichever games they choose. Notice this again. They have not responded to the question. We give developers the flexibility to implement FSR into whichever game they choose. In other words, if they're answering anything, they're saying, well, we're not going to stop them from implementing FSR into a game that has DLSS. Okay, but that is not the question that's being asked. They're being asked, are you blocking DLSS from being implemented in games that you bundle with? And there's a lot of evidence that many, but not all, of the games that is in fact taking place. AMD's response to this question is a non-response. They did not answer the question that was being asked, and so I hate to say it, but in a situation like that, it certainly heavily implies that the answer to the question is yes, they are blocking that technology when they can get the publisher to agree to it. Now, I can't say that they admitted to it, but given the fact that they did not deny it when given the direct opportunity to do so, that speaks volumes. And do you want to see what the correct kind of response looks like? WCCF Tech also asked Nvidia about this, and Nvidia has a response that actually answers the question. Nvidia does not and will not block, restrict, discourage, or hinder developers from implementing competitor technologies in any way. Look, AMD, it's as easy as that. You can just say that if it's true, but based on the evidence, that doesn't seem to be true about how AMD is approaching these bundle deals. So you know what, AMD? You need to do better. If you can't answer this question honestly and say you're not blocking it, then you need to change your policy so you can answer the question the right way. It says, we provide the support and tools for all game developers to easily integrate DLSS if they choose, and even created Nvidia Streamline to make it easier for game developers to add competitive technologies to their games. And this is from the Vice President of Developer Relations at Nvidia. So, basically, what we're getting at here is there is a clear body of evidence suggesting that AMD tries, in at least some, maybe is not successful in all, bundled games that they partner with to block DLSS from being added to the game. The data certainly suggests this is the pattern, and AMD had the opportunity to deny it, and they dodged the question and gave answers to other questions than what they were asked. This certainly implies that there is something like this going on, and Nvidia shows what a clear response looks like. Now, let's again end with the fact that that doesn't mean everything Nvidia is doing is perfect. For example, I like that AMD's FSR is a more open technology and is open to running on other GPUs and all of that. Nvidia's is closed. It's very locked down. DLSS 3 is only on their latest generation. It doesn't even go back to their 30 series GPUs. There's a lot of things that I don't like about Nvidia's approach, so don't get me wrong here. However, just intentionally blocking something like an Unreal Engine 4 game, which should be able to easily implement DLSS and thereby give a better upscaling experience to a large portion of the game's player base, it's just unacceptable that AMD is doing that when what they claim is that they're committed to doing what is best for game developers and gamers. I do not see how blocking DLSS implementation in a game is doing what is best for game developers and gamers. Do I have this wrong, guys? I mean, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. And again, accuse me of being an Nvidia shill and picking on AMD or something like that. I'm certainly not doing that. I'm not saying that we need a massive boycott. I'm not doing anything dramatic like that. I just want to call attention to what seems to me to be a very anti-consumer, anti-gamer approach that seems to be happening, and AMD is not denying that it's happening. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section, and despite all of this, I still hope that you all have an excellent day.